Hey, Jeannie, how are you? This is Dad, or Arthur Shmina. I'm a 82 and a half, 82 and 7/12 of age. And what I want to do with you now, Jeannie, is put on video some of the questions that Thomas Loff has asked. I'm going to answer some of them directly and some of them in a general kind of way. Okay? Now let's go with what he calls his family inquiry. How many brothers and sisters did Achilles really have? And he says, Steve mentioned to me 8 of them. You know, I think there are 8 children in Zissy's family, one of whom is Achilles. Now, if I can recall the names, I'm going to the best of my knowledge, I probably should really check this thing out with Steve because he's actually made a list of the names, listed them, okay?
Yeah.
But as to my memory, I'm going to say Steria, John, Mike, George, Nick. Did I say John? I did. I have 6, and the 2 girls, and the 2 girls are, Thomas Loff mentioned the name in here. Let me get it. Athena, and that's one of my dad's sisters, and then Everdiki. And as I recall my dad talking about all his brothers and sisters, Everdiki was the youngest.
Is that his?
And Steria was younger than my dad.
So that's his grandmother?
That Everdiki would be Thomas Loff's grandmother.
Okay.
All right? So, now also, when my dad came here, John was here. And he was living in Bristol, Pennsylvania. My dad came here on a boat, went through Ellis Island. He had 20 bucks on him, didn't know how to speak English, and I don't know how he got from Ellis Island, which is in New York, to Bristol, Pennsylvania. Now, it's not a great distance, but I'm sure he got a train or something like that, and he met John. And he stayed with John for a couple of 3 or 4 months just to get his feet on the ground and got some kind of an immediate job. Probably doing nothing significant, but he was always willing and able to do anything, and he did. And he stayed with John, I'm going to just say roughly, probably 6 months or something like that. And then he came to Detroit. During which time, very soon after that, John went back to the old country. Now, where he went, I really don't know. If he went to Bituli or if he went to Bucharest, I don't know. I mean, I may have heard, but I don't recall. Okay? So, John left. But John was sent here, again, as my dad tells the story. He was... I could use the word exiled or kicked out of Bituli because of political agitation. And that time that area was controlled by the Turks, the Ottoman Empire, and they wouldn't tolerate much from anybody. So they exiled him for a 5-year period. And my dad knew he was over here. My dad had, as my dad tells his story now, not my construction, he had this interest in coming to the United States, so he came, and John was the guy that he joined. So my dad came to Detroit. I want to tell you another little incident about John. No, I should say this. My dad went back to Europe, I think 1923, as I'll say this story. But I don't think at that time it was a death of anybody. He went back there. And of course, he cites a funny little incident we had built a 13 or 14-story building in downtown Detroit, and we did it in substantially quick time, 13 months. And my dad was very proud of this accomplishment of speed over a given period of work over a given period of time. That's how they measure achievements in construction. You got to do it quick, you got to do it efficiently, and you got to do it with quality. And he was very proud. He took these pictures back, and I think by that time, John was an architect. One of them was an architect, but he took all these pictures back, and he showed them to John, and he said, "Look, John, look what we did. We did this 13-story building, and no, I think it was probably a 10-story building in 13 months, speedy time." Well, John's reply wasn't, "Oh yeah," it was, "Why?" And my dad always got a kick out of that because John didn't have any interest in time. My dad had an interest in getting it done in time and quickly. So that's a little story about John.
So I didn't know he was an architect. It's the first you said.
Well, again, now I don't know if I don't know if it was a school architect. I think he was, though. I think my dad said he was. And of course, maybe Thomas Loft would really check that thing out.
Was he asking who John was married to?
What?
John?
Oh, yeah. John was married to, Thomas Loft. That's one of the questions that Thomas Loft has here. But at that trip in 1923, I don't think there was a death on the part of either his mother or his father. That's Achilles' mother or father. Maybe one of them had died, okay? But then when he went back in 1927, one of his parents, and I don't remember which one, was on their deathbed. And my mother suggested that he go back. And he did in 1927. Now, I don't know whether he got there on time or not. I mean, time to see her him prior to his death. But that was what provoked that trip. And he made that trip and then came back, and there was a long period of time during which he did not go back to the old country.
He called it the old country. I remember that.
Oh yeah. Well, all the immigrants to America always referred to Europe as the old country.
Right.
Because the United States and North America and South America, they're the new country.
Yeah.
You know, so that's how it got its name. And historically, you can see that. Let me take a look. Do you have Thomas Loft's questions near you?
You should forward them to me.
Well,
We could pause.
no. But let me take a look at them. I want to see brothers and sisters. Okay, I can't really clarify fully, but I think Steve is right with his numbers. And what is the name and the date of the birth and the death of Achilles' brother that was first to the get? I don't know the date of his birth or the date of his death, but he's the guy, John, that was, I'm sure, older than my dad.
Was he called Yanni?
He could.
I see one of these pictures.
Yeah, my dad called him John, but he could be Yanni, you know. I'm sure it is. What are you looking at there?
I am looking at pictures that Thomas Loft has posted on Steve's Facebook wall.
Well, how many brothers are there? How many males? That should be more accurate
Okay, so you're looking
than
at
mine.
the photo. Describe the photo that you're looking at there.
Okay, I'm looking at a photo of 4 people. Whoops.
Touch the trackpad.
Oh, of 4 people. And they are Athena, Stereo, and relatives in Bucharest, where Athena had been married. And then Thomas Loft says, who are the first and the third gentlemen in this photograph? Maybe 2 missing Shmina brothers, Nikolai and John. I would have to take a guess that they are members of the Shmina family. Just taking a look at the nose on these guys, you know, and their facial construction. If it's Athena, no, wait a minute. Is that, yeah, that is Styria. Okay. I have to go back to this. Yeah, I think they are. I would say that they are. I don't know who specifically the other two are, but I would think that they are members of the Shmina family. All those people look the same. They all have that same look. They have my dad's look, so.
And your look.
And my look. So they tell me. I'm reminded of. Okay, do you want me to? Do you want any more of this, or can I'm going to.
Yeah, go ahead with the questions.
Oh, okay. Now here, I'm getting back to Tomislav's questions.
I have copies now of it.
All right. Now, number one, I've answered the number of people in the family. Number two, what is the date of Achilles' brothers? I don't know anything. Number three, does he have any descendants? I do not know. Did the parents...
John?
Pardon me?
John.
Yeah, they were referring to John.
So we don't know who he married?
No.
Like, nobody knows?
Well, I'm sure that Achilles knows, but I don't have any record of it or have any knowledge of it.
And I guess they don't either.
That's possible.
Doesn't either.
That's possible, but it's going to come out of the woodwork with Facebook, you know. All right, question number 4. Did his parents really die? Now, I don't know anything about the specifics of where they died or who died first or the actual dates of the death. I don't know. I know that they were both deceased before I was born. Okay. Question 5. My father told me that as a child, together with their parents, he visited one brother Achilles besides a sister living in Bucharest. Well, that's possible. Now, the matter of being married to a wealthy wife from Romanian aristocracy, I never heard of that. Maybe my dad never knew the significance of their relationship. You know, but I've never in my life heard that they were of aristocracy, that they're working people, you know, scratching out a living, as everybody seems to do. That was A. And then B, another brother, a school teacher, they visited in Dubrovja. Do you know his name? I do not know.
So there's another brother whose name you don't know?
That's correct. In Tomislav's question, A and B, and it was B that I'm trying to answer right there.
So we don't really know the names fully of all Achilles' brothers and sisters.
Oh no, I could figure that out. You know, but because Steve's got them, and I'm going to just try a list. Start counting now.
Okay.
George, Nick, Mike, John, Styria, and Achilles. Five boys. 6 boys. 2 girls, Athena and Everdike.
So there were 8 children.
8 children in Zissy's and Dominica's family. Right. And Steve's got that pretty well worked out and listed.
And he does too.
Yeah, Tomislav. I would think Tomislav's got that pretty well mastered.
But you don't know who the brother was who might have lived over there, the school teacher brother?
No.
You don't know their occupations or what happened to them?
No. Now, I could say, no, I don't. But you know, if somebody were to have said a school teacher, I'd say, yeah, I guess I could have heard that in my time. But he was never telling us stories that we write down, specifics, you know, what they've done and what education they had or anything. It was just general conversation, you know.
We should have done that.
Well, you think of a lot of things in past, you know, should have, as they say, hindsight is always 100%, but it wasn't done. So Tomislav's looking into all this, and I'm sure he'll get a listing on it, and it will have been recorded. Now, some people have an intense interest in this. Tomislav obviously does, and Steve does.
Right.
Steve's been after all the background lines for years, and a deep interest in it, and a joy of it, even if it doesn't mean anything really, but it satisfies a person's inquiry. So Steve is delightful of this.
I am too. Steve,
And you are.
Steve, I like it for the emotional connected
Yeah.
that I feel.
Yeah.
He's the list maker.
Yeah.
Tomislav is the list maker, I think, too.
Yeah. I know. But when you try to put too much into blood lineage, I think it's an unnecessary conclusion, that these lines go on, especially when you have adopted kids.
Well,
And that's really a point of interest, because of adopted kids, of all my kids, and of all of my grandkids that are adopted, they don't seem to refer to their birth or blood mothers or fathers. They're looking at what my family background is and my mother's family background. And so they are interested in the background, even though the bloodlines didn't follow.
right.
You know.
However, as an adult, they might get,
That's possible.
They might get a Facebook contact from a birth parent.
That's very possible.
And then that would open up a road for them.
That's right. I know.
And
I could tell you all kinds of stories about guys that were adopted and then find their brothers and sisters, and
so
it's good and bad, But I know in the case of my Michael now, which is one of our adopted kids, my kids.
well, you should name them things.
Yeah. Yeah, Michael is adopted, of my kids. Jeannie is blood, Mary Kath is blood, Andrew's blood, Michael is adopted. But I know Michael as a kid, sometimes when he was a 7 or 8 year old kid, knowing he was adopted, would always sort of think, he may have come from a king's family or something, He had this interesting little, suspect of, really, maybe my father was a king, and
It's a very common
yeah.
fantasy.
But pretty soon he settled back in knowing who his father was, me, so we traveled onwards, and that's what he looks at his background on. And I'm sure when Michael hears about Tomislav's connection to us now, he's going to go into this with great interest likewise.
Right.
So, and he'll be excited to hear about all this past and this gap of time that's existed, that all of a sudden, bang, you have these cousins now.
Yeah.
In the case of Tomislav, you have this potential connection to this the young lady that you were writing to, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You remember that? You were writing to somebody in Belgrade.
That was more than 20 years ago. I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
Ask him about that.
Yeah.
I asked him about that.
Okay.
Alexander. Who was that mother? Do you know?
Uh,
Alexander's mom.
well, I know that came about via my dad's visit to, I'm going to say it was Belgrade, and whoever it was, married to a wealthy wife from Romanian aristocracy. I never heard of that. Maybe my dad never knew the significance of their relationship, but I've never in my life heard that they were of aristocracy, that they're working people, scratching out a living, as everybody seems to do. That was A. And then B, another brother, a school teacher, they visited in Dubrovja. Do you know his name? I do not know.
the brother whose name you don't know?
That's correct. In Tomislav's question A and B, and it was B that I'm trying to answer right there.
So we don't really know the names fully of all Achilles' brothers and sisters.
Oh no, I could figure that out. You know, but because Steve's got them. And I'm going to just try a list. Start counting now.
Okay.
George, Nick, Mike, John, Steria, and Achilles. Five boys. 6 boys. 2 girls, Athena and Everdike.
So there were 8 children.
8 children in Zissy's and Dominica's family. Right. And Steve's got that pretty well worked out and listed.
And he does too.
Yeah, Tomislav. I would think Tomislav's got that pretty well mastered.
But you don't know who the brother was who might have lived over there, the school teacher brother?
No.
You don't know their occupations or what happened to them?
No. Now, I could say, no, I don't. But you know, if somebody were to have said a school teacher, I'd say, yeah, I guess I could have heard that in my time. But he was never telling us stories that we write down, specifics, you know, what they've done and what education they had or anything. It was just general conversation, you know.
We should have done that.
Well, you think of a lot of things in past, you know, should have. As they say, hindsight is always 100%. But it wasn't done. So Tomislav's looking into all this, and I'm sure he'll get a listing on it, and it will have been recorded. Now, some people have an intense interest in this. Tomislav obviously does, and Steve does.
Right.
Steve's been after all the background lines for years, and a deep interest in it, and a joy of it. Even if it doesn't mean anything really, but it satisfies a person's inquiry. So Steve is delightful of this.
I am too. Except Steve.
And you are.
Steve, I like it for the emotional connectedness that I feel.
Yeah.
He's the list maker.
Yeah.
Tomislav is the list maker, I think, too.
Yeah. I know. But when you try to put too much into blood lineage, I think it's an unnecessary conclusion, you know, that these lines go on, especially when you have adopted kids.
Well,
and that's really a point of interest, because of adopted kids, of all my kids, and of all of my grandkids that are adopted, they don't seem to refer to their birth or blood mothers or fathers. They're looking at what my family background is and my mother's family background. And so they are interested in the background, even though the bloodlines didn't follow.
right.
You know.
However, as an adult, they might get,
That's possible.
They might get a Facebook contact from a birth parent.
That's very possible.
And then that would open up a road for them.
That's right. I know.
And
I could tell you all kinds of stories about guys that were adopted and then find their brothers and sisters, and
so
you know, it's good and bad, you know. But I know in the case of my Michael now, which is one of our adopted kids, my kids.
Well, you should name that thing.
Yeah, yeah. Michael is adopted, of my kids. Jeannie is blood. Mary Kath is blood. Andrew's blood. Michael is adopted. But I know Michael as a kid, sometimes when he was a 7 or 8 year old kid, knowing he was adopted, would always sort of think, you know, he may have come from a king's family or something. You know, he had this interesting little, you know, suspect of, you know, really, maybe my father was a king, you know, and
That's a very common
yeah.
fantasy.
But pretty soon he settled back in knowing who his father was, me. you know. So we traveled onwards, and that's what he looks at his background on. And I'm sure when Michael hears about Tomislav's connection to us now, he's going to go into this with great interest likewise.
Right.
So, and he'll be excited to hear about all this past and this gap of time that's existed, that all of a sudden, bang, you have these cousins now. Yeah. In the case of Tomislav, you have this potential connection to this the young lady that you were writing to, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. You remember that? You were writing to somebody in Belgrade.
That was more than 20 years ago. I was about 12 years old.
Okay.
Ask him about that.
Yeah.
I asked him about that.
Okay.
Alexander. Who was that mother? Do you know? Alexander's mom.
Well, I know that came about via my dad's visit to, I'm going to say it was Belgrade, and whoever it was had a relative, a daughter or a son. Was that a son you were writing to or a daughter?
It was the son's mother. The son was Alexander.
Okay, the son was Alexander?
Yes.
The-
It's his mom who wrote to me. And
Yeah,
was
no.
happy to hear from me and told me her son was Alexander. You're going to have to talk.
Yeah, her son was Alexander.
And
Okay. Sasha.
And we wrote a couple times.
Yeah,
And so if he traveled back, your dad, Achilles,
yeah.
after,
He traveled back while you were writing?
well, after his wife died, sort of describe that, how he would go back then, because that's probably when
Oh.
Tomislav met him.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you think that in one of my dad's trips back, he met Tomislav? I think that's very possible. My dad.
Tell him about how he would go back several times after Nana died.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay.
Just describe that.
All right. Now, once I'll go back to 1927 when he made that last trip back there. Through the 30s, it was a depression around here. Through the 40s, it was war, the World War II. Then the communists were involved with all over Eastern Europe. There were travel restriction controls and whatnot. And so there was a reluctance on the part of my dad to go back there. But then they started to open things up. As a matter of fact, it was about after my mother died, I think in 1970 or 69 when she died. And I think he wrote to, I believe it was Steria in Belgrade. And Steria said, no, come, we can travel around. The communists were still in charge then, but there was travel possibilities. So he went to Belgrade several times and met Steria, and then would travel around. He referred to Steria as his travel agent. He would take him to various spots. Okay, now, during which time...
So he was about a 70-year-old guy.
My dad was...
70.
Yeah, I'd say he was 75,
Okay.
but he was very healthy.
Yeah.
And had a lot of time on his hands, wanted to do this, so he did. And so in his travels around there, my dad's travels, he very easily could have encountered Tomislav, as Tomislav suggests. But he also he encountered somebody that you wrote to. And the specifics of how it went, I don't recall, whose daughter it was, whose son it was, or whatnot.
I don't either.
All right,
I
now,
want to find out who
yeah,
he was.
that's going to be your search to find that one out. And you will find it,
Right.
with all these ways that we have. You know what you ought to do? This tape that you're making right now,
Yeah.
we ought to put that on YouTube. Really? Think of that. I guess you could put it on. Well, put it on something.
YouTube.
YouTube. And then let Tomasoff take a look at it.
Good, Greg.
And others.
I will.
Okay, now, do you have any other questions of me?
He asked about the language. Look at the iPad there. His last one is about the Achilles language he originally spoke.
Oh, yeah, I know. Now, you know, Thomas Outlaw talks about the languages. Yeah. I have never heard of that. My dad never mentioned that word Vlach.
Reread that paragraph.
Well, my thing went off. You know, this iPad that I have always wants my password. And if I fail to be active with it for 4 minutes, I have to turn it back on, and that's what I'm going to do now. Now, bear with me now on this thing. I got to get a capital. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Return. Okay. Now, okay, I want to go back to Tomislav's inquiry here, Jeannie. The language. I am not familiar with Vlach or Aromanian.
Look up at the camera for a minute.
Yeah, now, my dad always spoke what he called Romanian, and yet he had a working knowledge of other languages there. He went to a grade school over there that was operated by French nuns, I think. And they spoke French. So he got a familiarity with French. He had a pretty good familiarity with Greek, because in Bituli, it was inhabited by Romanians and Greeks that had been expelled from Romania and Greece by the Turks for political agitation. He told me that's how his family got there. Now, I don't know how far back this went, you know, but there were Greeks and Romanians in Bituli. And he was able to have a pretty good control of Greek. And when he came to the United States, and in my contact with him as a kid, he had a lot of Greek buddies. And I said, well, how do you know these Greek guys? Well, they were back in Bituli. He met them back there, and they came here. One guy, Jim DeMar, established a restaurant. He was a very good guy. I remember him clearly. And he had this very nice restaurant in downtown Detroit, Jim DeMar. But I always was fascinated with this combination of Greek and Romanian. But anyway, that's some of my dad's background on. Spoke Romanian, French, Greek. He had a working knowledge of Italian and Spanish. He could get along in them. Okay? So he had an English. As a matter of fact, I could tell you another little incident where when he finished college, he went to Carnegie Tech. That's in Pittsburgh. Now it's now known as a university. It's called Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh. And one of the requirements for graduation was you had to take a foreign language. You can imagine a guy going through college, then they call him in. Then they called him in and said, Achilles, you can't graduate. Why not? You haven't taken a foreign language. Oh. And Achilles said, well, I did. My foreign language is English. And they all laughed. But I said to my dad, what'd you do then? And he said, I started to cry, which I'm doing now when I think of that. Okay, I gotta stop this. Anyway, that's a matter of languages. He spoke Romanian. He had buddies that had come here from Romania and or Italy and or wherever. And they belonged to this Romanian Byzantine Rite Catholic Church. And those guys spoke Romanian, you know. And some of them were very good at Romanian. And I used to ask them, as my dad was, and I'll say, when my dad was 75, and maybe 70. He had not been back to the old country in many years, and he would speak to these guys in Romanian, and I would ask him, how was his Romanian? And they'd say, not very good, not very good. He's been speaking English too long. But when he went back to the old country, I think he began to speak in whatever it was. He called it Romanian, and they got to be able to understand him quite well.
But his original language?
His original tongue was Romanian.
Not Vlach?
Well...
Or Romanian, or you don't know?
Yeah, not... I always knew it as Romanian, you know, pure Romanian, one of the Romance languages. But I could easily see where, you know, in that section of the world, where they did speak so many languages within a short distance, you could get a new language or a cross between languages, or, you know, so I could easily understand what Tomislav was saying about Vlach, you know. But I have a friend of mine that whose mother and father came from Slovakia, and which is really not far from this area. I mean, in the case of what we know quite recently as Yugoslavia, it's made up of all these countries, you know, one of which was Slovakia, a different language. You know, you go 200 miles, you get another language. Another 200 miles, you get another one. So it could very easily be that over time has been developed this Vlach language. Whether that's right or wrong, I don't know. But okay, I have to go to the airport.
Well,
now.
Wait,
No.
did you ever hear about Dmitri, Tomislav's dad, your cousin? Did you ever hear stories of the people who were your cousins over there? Did Achilles ever tell you?
Well, you got to keep in mind that when Dmitri, when my dad's brothers and sisters were raising a family in Europe, there was a gap of a period of time where he never went back there. So what they were doing in the detail of their life, he may have had a superficial knowledge in, but no intimate knowledge of what they were doing and how they were doing it and where they were doing it. But he was aware of it, you know. Now, he never instructed me in any way that I should write it down and record what everybody was doing. But you can imagine that, you know, things are going on simultaneously in different areas of the world and having similar problems and similar interests. So when my dad went back to Europe in the 70s, he refamiliarized himself with his brothers and sisters and their children and grandchildren. He would encounter them in the trips, and he found that joyful. And that's where he met Tomislav. Yeah. But he never came back to me and said, hey, I met Tomislav over there. He just, you know, recited all the people that he, in a general way, that he had met and found it joyful. He had a good time there. So, I think I've answered Tomislav's questions. Not that I've given him any real information, but at least I've answered them.
Now,
you know,
it's been interesting. You know, you've been here with me.
Yeah.
During all this, you know.
As this arrived, this
right.
point of interest.
Kind of.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, actually, I knew about it before I came here. You know, because the night before, the afternoon, Andy came to me and said, when are you going to Florida? I said, tomorrow. And then he went on to tell me that Tomislav had contacted Lisa and had described himself, and then, Andy asked me what I knew of it. And I said, well, I think it's very legitimate, very possible. And by that time I went home, got packed, went to the airport the next day and came down here. And then you told me about it. You had likewise by that time heard from Tomislav. So yeah, I'm interested in this and passing all the info around. And
all the pictures?
Yeah, all the pictures, you're right.
So you can see it on your iPad?
Yeah. My iPad, I can look at them on the airplane when I'm going home today, so. But I got to make sure I got enough battery power in this thing, and I guess I do.
You could write to
Yeah.
Tomislav yourself.
I could, but I got to get a little bit more mastery of how to send an email.
Oh, please.
No. I guess I got Tomislav's email address. Do I?
You do.
Oh yeah, okay, it's right here. Yep. Right, and I will write Tomislav. I'm getting more and more accustomed to this device, so. Okay. I am ready to sign off. Jeannie, it's been nice of you to have interviewed me in the way you have. If it has been an interview, I've done most of the talking. You've provoked questions. But I think this should satisfy the interests of some people. And if anybody has anything more to inquire about, Jeannie, with your talents in this medium, I would be very happy to cooperate. And with that, I will say goodbye.